Hey guys, Yamakiller here, back again with a what decks to play this week video. As per usual, I don't necessarily play all these formats on a high level very often. I do try and get 1 to 2 of these formats, locked in every week for whatever tournaments are going on the weekend. But I am going to be going over the 6 major formats here: Standard, Pioneer, Modern, Legacy, Vintage, and Pauper. At least the major formats to Magic the Gathering Online. No historic years. I am completely lost on that one. But I'm going to try to go over what I know about the formats, what decks I think are good from information that I've either gathered myself from playing, from Twitter, from people that I have conversed with that are playing these high-level tournaments in these formats, in Facebook groups, Twitter, etc. And try and give you my best idea on what decks you should be playing this weekend in each format. So with that being said, let's get into it. We're going to start off with Standard. Now, currently, I've seen a lot of people doing well with Naya Winota. Now, this uses the card Winota, Joiner of Forces. Basically, you attack with a non-human creature, look at the top 6 cards, and you put a human creature into play from those cards onto the battlefield. Basically, your deck plays a lot of kind of mopey cards, and then plays Winota and kind of just kills the opponent immediately afterwards. Using cards like these one-drops, Jasper's Sentinel, Lotus Cobra, Eskia's Chariot. Basically using these cards to facilitate a very, very good Winota turn, and if you can do that, you do stuff that is very, very powerful in the Standard format. Now, if you don't want to play more mid-range, you can play a deck like Dimir Rose that is much more controlling. Although this deck is very good at beating the more controlling and very mid-rangey decks like Sultai Control. Not very good if you expect a lot of aggro like Mono Red, possibly Naya. But if you expect some Sultai and Jeskai, I can imagine this deck being very good. It allows you to play a lot of low to the ground threats like Soaring Thought Thief, Guild Enforcer at instant speed, while also being able to play a lot of good removal spells and counter spells, and some good ways to refill your hand and into the story. You also get to play Luris of the Dream Den, another incredibly powerful card, and being able to play a companion in basically any format feels pretty broken. Now finally, a lot of people have been doing well with Sultai Ultimatum. This is a deck that basically tries to get to Emergent Ultimatum and then kill your opponent, usually after casting it, and plays a Sultai Control Shell with Yorion as, the core around it. Cultivate as a way to gain card advantage, as well as ramp up to your Emergent Ultimatum, and lots of 2-mana, ways to either play well with your Yorion and Omen of the Sea, or, use as a removal spell in the form of Heartless Act and other such cards. So, that is my take on Standard, and let us move into Pioneer. Now, Pioneer, over the weekend, had a showcase event, as well as a super qualifier. And in the showcase event, it was Jund Citadel that did very well. Uses the power of Mayhem Devil, plus a lot of token creation or sack outlets like Woe Strider, Catacomb Sifter, Priest of the Forgotten Gods, and Collect Company to facilitate some nice turns, as well as Bolas Citadel to one-shot your opponent if you have Mayhem Devil and, 9 other permanents to sacrifice. This deck plays over the top of a lot of other mid-range decks, being able to use Bolas Citadel to get a lot of value, as well as, being able to ping down some small creatures with Mayhem Devil. This deck does struggle against the control decks of the format, like Blue-Black Control, but with that deck losing a bit of popularity, I think this deck is poised to do very well in your next Pioneer event. Now, if you want to be more on the aggro side, Mono Black Aggro won the Super Qualifier this weekend, and it's a deck that I have liked in the past, and has basically been around since the beginning of the format. So, it's a deck that continues to do well. A lot of people say it has no good matchups. Yep, the deck that has no good matchups continues to do well in basically every event, and putting up a top 8 in basically every event. So, I would also play this deck. You can also play a controlling deck like Dimir Control if you expect a lot of Jund Citadel around, or a deck like Is It Phoenix that, uses the power of Arclight Phoenix and Treasure Cruise to really outpower a lot of strategies if you get your engine going. Now, let us move on to Modern. Modern has a lot of things going on right now. There's still a lot of ebbs and flows in Modern. While a lot of people were using Modern Horizons 2 cards in a lot of different decks, people are starting to look at older strategies and adding Modern Horizons 2 cards to it rather than making the newer Modern Horizons 2 card strategies. Now, one of those decks is Elementals. Uses the power of Solitude plus Fury and Ephemerate to gain tons of value. Uses Risen Reef and Omnath to also lock in more value. And basically, while it doesn't play any of the original, 4 pillars I talked about, Ragavan, Urza's Saga, Cascade, it does use Ephemerate plus these pitch cards, and the pitch cards are incredibly powerful when getting even more than just a singleton value with, the Ephemerate and such. So, this is a deck that I think has done well very recently, top 8 a lot of tournaments, and I believe Canister has been hyping up a lot, and it's a deck that I think has high potential. Now, there's these other decks that I think are very good as well. The Crashing Footfalls Cascade deck. It allows you to play these powerful Cascade cards, Charlotte's Agent of Violent Outburst to get a free Crashing Footfalls, and a lot of great interaction in Force Negation, Brazen Borrower, Fury, Prismari Command, bridging the gap between your blue cards and your red cards for the pitching effects, as well as, Fire, Ice, and some other, cards that allow you to facilitate playing 2-drops and 1-drops, even though it doesn't mess up your Cascade effects. Some other decks that I think are a bit sleepers, Demir Mill can be very good against these Cascade decks, being able to Surgical Extraction the Cascade target, and then, using some Force Negations or other good counter spells out of the sideboard and milling your opponent very effectively. There's some other decks that I think are very good. If you're looking to play an off-the-beat Ragavan deck, I think Mono Red Prowess, or I guess Mono Red Obosh now, is another nice deck to play. But if you're looking for just the tried and true good decks, I would play the Crashing Footfall decks. I'd play Hammer Time. I think Hammer Time, I played it today and went 4-1, and I was just misplaying and punting off every which way, but the deck is just incredibly good, incredibly quick, and can play some long games. I won a mulligan to 4 against a Jeskai control deck. Just played Urza Saga 3 times and just kept activating it, and it was just great. And finally, there is not this deck. I'm trying to find the correct deck. Here we go. There's the Grixis or 4-color or even 2-color decks where you use Luris as well as, Dragon Rage Channeler and Ragavan to gain some incremental advantage while also playing really low to the ground. So you get to play a lot of cheap spells while also gaining advantage over the long game, as well as getting to Luris, playing with Kolaghan's Command, kind of just getting to loop Mishra's Bauble and all these other creatures very, very efficiently. Now, what am I going to be playing? Personally, I played Gruul midrange today with Blood Moons. I think Blood Moon is a very, very powerful card. I played this deck a lot in the past, and while I think these other decks may have more ability to be the top decks, I believe having knowledge of the deck you're playing and knowledge of the format you're playing is very important, and I think I have a lot of knowledge on how to mulligan and play with this Gruul midrange deck, because I've played it a lot in the past. So personally, I'm either going to be playing Mono Red Obosh or this Gruul midrange deck, because I value having experience with the deck over just playing what is necessarily the best deck. Now, let us move on to Legacy. These formats, these older formats, unfortunately, Modern Horizons 2 kind of ruined them a lot, as is most formats. Because I think there are really only 3 playable decks, as I have both talked to people about it as well as just playing it myself. Now, these 3 decks are Jeskai Standstill, uses Ragavan plus Urza's Saga and Wasteland. Basically abuses Ragavan and Urza's Saga with a Standstill, Daze, Force of Will, Stifle, pile. Basically, getting to just play, you just get to play all the good cards, as well as a lot of good tempo-y things, and you get to play tempo, you get to play a long game with extra value. You just get to do a lot of different things in this deck that are kind of hard to interact with at a lot of different points in the game. Now we've also got tried and true Izzet Delver. We've got Dragon Rage Channeler and Ragavan coming in here. Some people have even been cutting the Delver secrets. You also got Murktide Region. Basically, you got Wasteland, you got Daze, you got Force of Will, and you got some efficient threats and some efficient card advantage and expressive iteration. That's basically the secret behind this strategy, and one of the best ways that you can be doing things in Legacy, and has been ever since Delver's Secrets came out. Now, finally, I think Snow Miracles is a very good deck, basically using Uro, banned in most other formats, still incredibly good in Legacy. Basically using the new removal spell and Prismatic Ending, along with Swords of Plowshares, to kill these efficient threats that people are playing, and overpower them in the end with Sylvan Library, Uro, and a combo between a turn 2 Dress Down on the end step into playing Uro, essentially getting you the 6/6 onto the battlefield without having to sacrifice it. Just running away with the game is very, very powerful. And Terminus being a 1-mana sweeper, sometimes you just got to get your opponent, especially when they are doing stuff that is very efficient as well. So, let us move on to Vintage. Vintage, you can play a bunch of different decks, but there's basically 3 different ways of thinking. There's either Mishra's Workshop, there's Combo, there's Bazaar, and finally there's Midrange. Now, if you want to play Mishra's Workshop, personally I think Golo Stacks is the way to go right now. You can go more aggressive with the Ravager Shops, but Golo Stacks allows you to basically play Crucible of Worlds plus Wasteland / Ghost Quarter without a lot of basics. Ghost Quarter is Wasteland a lot of the time. And sphere effects that make your opponents harder to cast their spells. Sphere of Resistance, Thorn of Amethyst, Trinisphere, and uses Golos plus some other lands like Urza's Saga to close out the game. If you want to play more mid-rangey, Sultai is the way to go. Basically a Legacy port of what a Sultai deck would look like in Legacy, with some restricted cards in Ancestral, Moxen, Black Lotus, and Oko as well. This deck has been putting up a lot of results, and if you want to play mid-range, I think Sultai is the way to go. Finally, if you want to play combo, this is what I would play. I would play Doomsday. Doomsday is basically, since Thassa's Oracle came out, has been the best combo deck in Legacy, in Vintage, and a player named Discover N has basically only played Doomsday and top 8'd nearly 50% of all of the Vintage challenges that has ever happened on Magic Online that he's played in, which is pretty crazy stat, and Doomsday with nearly all of them. So if I were to play personally, I'm going to be playing a more combo-y version of Golos stacks, but that is because I played a lot with it and happen to do well with it, even though no one else can. But personally, if I wasn't going to be playing that, I would play Doomsday, as it's a great combo deck that is hard to interact with in a meaningful way when they have loads of interaction themselves. Now, I can quickly go over Pauper. There's really only 3 decks to play. There's Affinity, there is Storm, and there is Dimir Fairies. There's, advantages to each of them. Dimir Fairies if you want to play a bit more controlling, Affinity if you want to be a bit more aggressive, and Storm if you want to kill your opponent on turn 1, 2, and 3. So, whichever one of those fits your playstyle, play either of them. They've all put up great results. They all usually make up somewhere of like 5 to 7 of each Pauper top 8, and there's not much else to say about Pauper until they make some bannings to the Storm deck. Well, if you liked anything about this video, anything that I've had to say, make sure to give a like to the video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitch and Twitter in the description below, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.